The shattered glass crashed against the wooden floor of Kevin's cabin, like a thunderclap breaking the pre-dawn silence. Kevin jolted awake, his hand automatically reaching for the pistol he kept beneath his pillow. A habit from another life that he couldn't shake, even after 3 years of isolation. His eyes adjusted to the darkness as he scanned the room. The disciplined movements of a man who had learned to suppress fear in favor of survival instinct. 2:41 a.m. read the digital clock beside his bed. The mountain air whistled through the newly created opening, carrying with it fine particles of snow and the unmistakable sound of labored breathing. Kevin raised his gun toward the window, its frame now jagged with broken glass. A figure stumbled through the opening, humanoid, but distinctly not human. In the dim moonlight filtering through the clouds, he could make out blue-green skin and black eyes with a hint of purple luminescence. She wore what appeared to be a sleek, form-fitting biological armor that hugged her frame like a second skin. The intruder collapsed against the wall, her body convulsing violently. She couldn't stand straight, her legs buckling beneath her as she slid down against the rough wooden planks. "Don't shoot," she gasped, her voice a mixture of pain and desperation. "I need your help." Kevin approached cautiously, medical training overriding his initial defensive posture. He lowered his weapon slightly, but kept it ready. As a former battlefield surgeon, he'd treated enough species to recognize a Zeri when he saw one. They rarely ventured this close to human settlements, unless desperate or hunting. Her head drooped forward as she began to fall. Kevin lunged forward on instinct, catching her before she hit the floor. That's when he noticed it, the unusual swelling around her hips and groin area. Her armor seemed stretched to its limits there, as though containing something ready to burst. "Pelvic gland," she managed between pained breaths, her eyes rolling back. "Post-combat, adrenaline surge. I can't control it." Kevin had heard rumors about Zeri physiology, but never encountered it firsthand. The implications of her words hit him with sudden clarity. This wasn't just any medical emergency. "Can you walk?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head, grimacing. The swelling blocks movement. With practiced efficiency, Kevin holstered his weapon and lifted her, surprised by how light she felt despite her solid muscle structure. He carried her swiftly through the narrow hallway to his makeshift medical room, once the cabin's second bedroom, now filled with salvaged equipment from his previous life. The tools were outdated, but meticulously maintained. Sterilization protocols were the one ritual he'd refused to abandon in his self-imposed exile. He placed her carefully on the examination table, her body trembling beneath his hands. Kevin activated the old scanner unit, its display flickering to life with a blue glow that cast eerie shadows across her alien features. The scan results appeared quickly. Pelvic temperature, 110 degrees. Tissue pressure dangerously elevated. A flashing red warning label that read, "Pelvic gland overload," alongside several parameters Kevin didn't recognize. "I need to sedate you," Kevin said, reaching for a drawer of emergency medications. "No anesthesia!" she cried out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength, her eyes fixed on his with sudden lucidity. "Biosignatures can only decrease when you touch me." Kevin froze, the syringe half prepared in his hand. "What exactly are you saying?" She struggled to form coherent sentences, her breathing becoming more erratic. "Post-combat flare. Secondary survival reflex after major trauma. Stimulates. Reproduction drives." Her body arched involuntarily. "Normally, hormones self-regulate, but I took a black dose to increase survival odds. Now the system won't come down." Kevin noticed the bioarmor beneath her skin growing rigid, blood vessels protruding visibly across her abdomen and thighs. At this rate, she would stroke out in minutes. "Your armor," Kevin said, studying the interlocking plates that seemed fused to her skin. "We need to remove it." She nodded weakly. Pressure must be released. Locks. 3 of them. Side seams. Kevin found the first bio-armor clasp near her left hip. An organic-looking interface that resembled both technology and living tissue. He used surgical precision to manipulate what appeared to be a release mechanism. The armor shuddered and emitted a faint glow as it began to disengage. The Zeri woman hissed in pain, mixed with relief, as the first pressure point was released. The second clasp near her right hip proved more difficult. Her skin flushed darker, and muscles in her stomach and upper back began to spasm. Kevin worked methodically, aware that every second mattered. The clasp finally yielded with a soft click, and another section of armor loosened. "One more," he murmured, locating the final release point at her pelvic bone. As the third clasp disengaged, the armor fractured into segments that peeled away from her body, revealing a thin, transparent bodysuit beneath. She was effectively naked now, the suit doing little to conceal her alien anatomy. Kevin realized with growing unease that direct skin-to-skin contact would be necessary to lower her temperature and stabilize her condition. Kevin hesitated, the doctor in him battling with ethical boundaries. He couldn't let a patient strip naked before him, but if he didn't touch her, she would die. He took a step back, considering alternatives. In that moment of hesitation, she reached out and grabbed his neck, pulling him closer with desperation in her eyes. "Don't back away," she pleaded. "If you don't touch me, I'll die." Kevin swallowed hard, then nodded. He pulled on sterile medical gloves and carefully removed the remainder of her clothing, exposing her fully. With clinical detachment, he placed his hand gently over her groin area. Her skin burned like contained fire against his palm. A small moan escaped her lips, her body shuddering at his touch. Each time his fingers adjusted position, heat seemed to flow back through his hand, up his arm, settling uncomfortably in his core. She writhed slightly, muscles contracting, but after several moments, the first signs of relief began to manifest as her breathing pattern stabilized. "It's working," he said quietly, monitoring her vitals on the scanner. "Your temperature is starting to drop." She didn't respond verbally, just closed her eyes as waves of what appeared to be both pain and relief washed over her. Kevin maintained contact, keeping his focus on the medical readouts rather than her exposed body. The moment of calm was shattered by the distinct sound of a pulse tracker activating outside the cabin. Kevin had left the door to the medical room slightly ajar, and now the unmistakable whine of scanning equipment penetrated the silence. "Mercs," she whispered, eyes snapping open in terror. "Zeri police! They're tracking my hormone signature." 2 armored figures approached the cabin, their scanning beams sweeping methodically through the windows. Kevin could see their silhouettes through the thin curtains. Humanoid, but distinctly different from either humans or his patient, with specialized environmental suits and weapons designed for capture rather than killing. The Zeri woman moaned in renewed pain, forcing Kevin to intensify the skin contact to prevent her temperature from spiking again. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his eyes reflecting both concern and something more complicated as he worked to keep her stable. "They can't find me here," she said between clenched teeth. "They'll take me back for merging." "Merging?" Kevin asked, continuing his treatment while keeping one eye on the approaching figures. "Forced integration with war machinery. Permanent." Her eyes pleaded with him. "Please." Kevin made a split-second decision. He pulled a sheet over her exposed body while maintaining necessary contact, then positioned himself to block the doorway just as the cabin's front door crashed open. The confrontation was immediate and tense. 2 mercs stood in his living room, their scanning equipment pointed directly at him. "Stand aside, human," the first merc commanded, its voice modulated through translation equipment. "We detect biological anomalies consistent with fugitive signatures." Kevin squared his shoulders, blocking their view of the medical room. "Show your warrant," he demanded, knowing full well they had none that would be recognized in human territory. This mountainside existed in a gray zone between jurisdictions, precisely why he'd chosen it. "We see biological anomalies," the second, Merck insisted, adjusting settings on a handheld scanner. "This area will be searched." "Try it," Kevin challenged, his free hand moving imperceptibly toward a concealed panel beside the doorframe. "This is a medical facility, protected under Section 47 of the Border Treaty. Patient confidentiality applies to all species." The first Merc took a step forward. "The fugitive is property of the Zeri continuance. Surrender her now." Behind him, the Zeri woman's heart rate spiked dangerously on the monitor. Kevin had to end this confrontation quickly, or lose his patient. With practiced precision, he pressed the hidden panel, activating an electromagnetic pulse designed to temporarily disable sensitive equipment, one of many safeguards he'd installed during his more paranoid months of isolation. The Merc's scanning devices sparked and died. In the moment of confusion, Kevin acted. He grabbed a surgical knife wrapped in cloth from a nearby tray and fashioned it into a makeshift electrical disruptor, jabbing it into the first Merc's environmental suit junction point. The Merc collapsed, its neural systems temporarily overloaded. The second Merc reacted quickly, drawing a weapon. But Kevin was faster. Years of battlefield surgery had honed his reflexes to near superhuman levels. He kicked the weapon aside and delivered a precise strike to what he knew was a vulnerable connection point in Zeri physiology, the junction between neck and shoulder. The second Merc fell to its knees, but not before activating a small red device on its wrist. "Red alert," the Zeri woman whispered in horror. "They've signaled the entire network. Every Merc in the region will converge here." Kevin returned to her side, checking her vitals. The brief interruption had caused her temperature to climb again. The treatment needed to continue. But they couldn't stay here. "There's a hidden space beneath the exam table," he said, already working to open a concealed trapdoor. "We need to get you down there before more arrive." He carefully disconnected the monitoring equipment and wrapped her in a thermal blanket before helping her into the crawl space. The area was cramped, but contained emergency supplies and access to a tunnel he'd dug during the first year of his self-imposed exile. Paranoia sometimes had its benefits. Once inside, Kevin held a knife against her chest, forcing her to rewrap herself to minimize heat signatures. Their eyes met in the dim glow of two flashlights. The intimacy of their position, her vulnerability, and the danger surrounding them created a strange, charged atmosphere. "We're bound now," she whispered. "They'll track us together." Kevin gripped her hand firmly. "If they find you, I won't run. I'll fight beside you." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that transcended their doctor-patient relationship. They could feel each other's heartbeats, breaths, the bioelectric current that flowed between them. They had become survival partners in the truest sense. They remained hidden for hours as more Mercs arrived, scanning the cabin and surrounding area. Kevin had designed the crawl space with multiple layers of insulation specifically to mask life signs. But they couldn't stay forever. The Zeri woman, who finally identified herself as Suena, needed proper medical attention beyond what could be provided in their hiding place. "The eastern tunnel leads to a ravine," Kevin whispered. "If we time it right, we can make it to my emergency bunker about 3 kilometers from here." Suena nodded weakly. "The storm will help mask our heat signatures." When night fell again, they made their move. Kevin emerged first, confirming the cabin was temporarily clear, then helped Suena through the narrow passage. She was stronger now, but still unsteady. The swelling had reduced significantly, though not completely. They slipped into the howling winter night, the temperature well below freezing. Kevin had outfitted them both with thermal gear from his emergency supplies, but the journey would still be treacherous. Snow fell in heavy sheets, limiting visibility, but also providing cover from Zeri tracking systems. They moved as quickly as Suena's condition allowed, staying low among the trees. Twice they had to stop and hide as Merc patrols passed nearby. During one such pause, Suena noticed Kevin favoring his right arm. "You're injured," she said, examining a deep gash where he'd fallen on jagged ice. "It's nothing," he dismissed. "We need to keep moving." "No." She reached into a small pouch she'd managed to keep from her original gear. "Let me—" With surprising gentleness, she applied a Zeri healing compound to his wound. The sensation was strange, a cooling burn followed by immediate relief as the damaged tissue began knitting together. "Why are you helping me?" Kevin asked, watching her work. "I'm just a human who happened to be in the right place." Suena met his gaze steadily. "You didn't have to touch me. Most wouldn't have." She finished bandaging his arm. "You risked yourself for someone you should consider an enemy." "I'm a doctor," Kevin replied simply. "Former doctor," he corrected himself. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the distinctive whine of Merc hover vehicles in the distance. They pressed onward through the snow, navigating the treacherous mountain terrain. Kevin deliberately led them through a field he'd rigged with thermal decoy mines. Not explosive, but designed to give off false heat signatures to confuse pursuers. The strategy worked. Behind them, they heard the Mercs diverting to investigate the decoys. This bought them precious time to reach the hidden entrance to Kevin's bunker, a reinforced steel door disguised as part of the mountain's natural rock formation, nearly buried under accumulated snow. Kevin entered a complex sequence on a concealed panel, and the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. They stumbled inside, exhausted, as the door sealed automatically behind them. The bunker was larger than Suena had expected, a concrete and steel shelter built into the mountainside, stocked with supplies and equipment, far more sophisticated than the cabin had contained. This was clearly Kevin's true refuge. The cabin, merely an outpost. "Sit," Kevin instructed, gesturing toward a medical chair that looked far more advanced than anything in the cabin. "Let me check your condition." Suena complied, watching as Kevin activated systems around the bunker. Soft lighting illuminated various areas, a small kitchen space, sleeping quarters, and what appeared to be a research station filled with documents and digital displays. Kevin approached with a medical scanner that made his cabin equipment look primitive by comparison. He ran it over Suena's body, studying the readings carefully. "The flare is subsiding," he said, "but your system is still unstable. The black dose altered your hormone regulation more extensively than I initially thought." "Will I need more treatment?" Suena asked, the question hanging between them with new weight. Kevin met her eyes. "Possibly, but we should be able to manage it with less invasive methods, now that the acute phase has passed." He moved to the research station and switched on a light that cast dim illumination across stacks of papers and digital displays. Suena followed. Her curiosity piqued. On the screens were reports about Zeri physiology, combat enhancements, and bioweapon integration. "You've studied my people," she observed, scanning the documents. Kevin nodded. "Part of my past work, before I withdrew from everything." Suena picked up one report, skimming its contents. Her expression darkened as she read. "They classify me as a biological weapons variant." Tears formed in her eyes, catching the dim light. "I just wanted to live as a normal person." Kevin took the report gently from her hands. "These are old files. They don't define who you are now." "Don't they?" She gestured to her body. "I was engineered from childhood to be a warrior. The flare reaction is built into my genetic code to ensure survival and reproduction after combat. I'm a weapon with a built-in preservation system." "You survived because of your own strength," Kevin countered. "And today because of me. We'll fight together." The intensity of his declaration surprised them both. They fell silent, the weight of their situation settling between them. Finally, Kevin spoke again, more softly. "Why did you leave them? The Zeri forces?" Suena looked away. I saw what they were planning for the next generation of warriors. The merging would be complete. No separation between machine and being. No personal choice. She clenched her fists. I was to be the prototype. Kevin understood withdrawal all too well. He found himself sharing his own past. The battlefield surgeries that had saved countless lives, but scarred his soul. The political decisions that had turned medicine into a weapon. His final breaking point when he'd been ordered to withhold treatment from enemy civilians. They talked through the night, finding unexpected common ground in their respective traumas. As dawn approached, exhaustion finally claimed them. Kevin showed Suena to a small sleeping area, while he took a seat near the monitoring systems, determined to maintain watch. "You should rest too," Suena said, noticing his fatigue. "Soon," he promised, checking the bunker's security systems one more time. Suena hesitated at the entrance to the sleeping quarters. "Kevin," she said softly, "thank you for not seeing me as just a patient, or just a Zeri." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and watched as she disappeared into the small room. Kevin maintained his vigil until his eyes could no longer stay open. He drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams filled with fragments of battlefield memories, now interspersed with flashes of blue-green skin and pleading eyes. He woke to find Suena already up, examining her modified bodysuit. She had removed most of the metallic components, leaving primarily the flexible, form-fitting base layer. She looked stronger, though her movements still betrayed some lingering discomfort. "The scanners show no pursuit within a 5-kilometer radius," she informed him. "But they'll expand their search pattern soon." Kevin rose, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We should use the time to plan our next steps." They spent the morning reviewing their options, which were limited. The Mercs would continue hunting Suena as long as she remained within their jurisdiction. Crossing into fully human-controlled territory would bring its own dangers. Humans were notoriously suspicious of unregistered Zeri, especially those with combat modifications. "There's a resistance cell," Suena eventually said. "Others like me who refused merging. They operate in the borderlands between the neutral zone and the southern frontier." "Can you contact them?" She shook her head. "Not directly. There's a dead drop system. Physical locations where messages can be left." She hesitated. "The nearest one is 2 days' journey from here." "Then that's where we go," Kevin decided. He began gathering supplies, food, medical equipment, weapons. Suena watched him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "This isn't your fight, Kevin. Once we reach the drop point, I can continue alone." Kevin paused in his preparations. "Is that what you want?" Their eyes met across the room, the question hanging between them. Before Suena could answer, a proximity alarm sounded, soft but unmistakable. Someone or something had entered the outer perimeter of Kevin's security network. They moved quickly to the monitoring station. The thermal imaging showed a small patrol of Mercs, moving methodically through the forest about a kilometer away. "They're following a search pattern," Suena observed. "Not tracking us specifically. Not yet." Kevin nodded in agreement. "We should move at nightfall. The storm is supposed to intensify. That will help cover our trail." As they waited for darkness, they finalized their plan. They would travel light and fast, using the terrain and weather to their advantage. Kevin had mapped several potential routes to the southern frontier, avoiding known checkpoints and surveillance zones. When night fell, Suena prepared to leave, putting on the modified bodysuit and a thermal outer layer Kevin had provided. Before opening the bunker door, Kevin handed her a small flask. "Wait," he called. "Supplies." The flask contained heated water infused with electrolytes and nutrients. A simple gesture that carried unexpected weight. Suena accepted it with a nod, her fingers brushing his. They emerged into the snowy night, the wind howling around them. Suena moved with surprising grace despite her recent condition, her combat training evident in every step. Kevin followed, less fluid, but equally determined. They traveled through the night, navigating by Kevin's knowledge of the terrain and Suena's enhanced night vision. By dawn, they had covered significant ground, putting distance between themselves and the Merc patrols. They took shelter in a dense thicket of evergreens as daylight broke, eating sparingly from their supplies. Suena noticed Kevin watching her with an unreadable expression. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking," he replied, "about how quickly everything can change. Yesterday morning, I was alone in my cabin, convinced I'd never rejoin the world. Now here I am, helping a Zeri fugitive reach a resistance cell." Suena smiled faintly. "Life has a way of disrupting our plans." "Does it ever?" Kevin agreed. Then, more seriously, "Do you regret coming to my cabin?" "No," she answered without hesitation. "Without you, I would have died. The flare would have killed me." "The treatment was unconventional," Kevin acknowledged, a hint of professional embarrassment coloring his words. "But effective," Suena countered. She held his gaze steadily. "In my culture, such intimate healing creates a bond. We call it imprinting, a connection of bioenergetic signatures." Kevin absorbed this information, understanding its implications. "Is that why the Mercs can track us together now? They sense this connection." She nodded. "They'll detect the resonance pattern. It's subtle, but their scanners are designed to identify such anomalies." She paused. "I should have warned you." "Would it have changed anything?" Kevin asked. Suena considered this. "Would you have hesitated to save me if you knew it would mark you as well?" "No," he said simply. They continued their journey when darkness fell again, pushing through increasingly difficult terrain. The border regions were deliberately left wild, natural barriers supplementing the technological surveillance systems that separated human territories from the neutral zone. By the second night, Suena's strength was flagging. The aftereffects of the flare combined with the arduous journey were taking their toll. During a brief rest, Kevin noticed her shivering despite the thermal gear. "Let me check," he insisted, pulling out a portable medical scanner. The readings confirmed his suspicions. Her core temperature was dropping, a dangerous counter-reaction to the previous hyperthermia. Without proper treatment, she could slip into shock. "Your system is crashing," he explained. "The black dose depleted your natural regulatory functions." "How long until we reach the drop point?" he asked. "Another 4 hours at least," Suena estimated, teeth chattering. "I can make it." Kevin shook his head. "Not like this." He made a quick decision. "There's an old monitoring station about a kilometer east, abandoned years ago during the border realignment. It should have basic shelter." They diverted to the station, a small, concrete structure partially embedded in the mountainside. As Kevin had predicted, it was deserted, though the security door remained intact. He overrode the simple lock mechanism, and they slipped inside. The interior was Spartan, a few metal chairs, a defunct communications console, and what had once been a sleeping area for monitoring personnel. Most importantly, it was insulated against the bitter mountain cold. Kevin set to work immediately, using their portable heating unit to raise the ambient temperature while preparing a makeshift bed from their emergency supplies. Suena's condition was deteriorating rapidly, her movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. "I need to stabilize your core temperature," Kevin explained, helping her out of the wet outer layers of clothing. "Your body isn't regulating properly." "More skin contact?" she asked, attempting humor despite her condition. "Something like that," Kevin confirmed, but more comprehensive this time. He removed his own outer clothing, keeping only the thin base layer. The medical principle was sound. Shared body heat was the most effective treatment for hypothermia under field conditions. Kevin guided Suena to the makeshift bed and lay beside her, wrapping his arms around her shivering form. He pulled the thermal blankets over them both, creating a cocoon of warmth. "Your heart rate is too slow," he murmured, feeling her pulse. "Stay with me, Suena." "I'm trying," she whispered, her voice weak. "Talk to me. Keep me here." So Kevin talked. He told her about his life before the wars, medical school, his family now scattered across different colonies, his early idealism. He shared stories from his first years as a doctor, before combat assignments had hardened him. He spoke of the mountains in springtime, when wildflowers broke through the snow and animals emerged from hibernation. Gradually, Suena's shivering subsided. Her breathing deepened, and her pulse strengthened. The closeness between them, initially clinical, evolved into something more comforting. Then, something neither was ready to name. "Why did you really leave?" Suena asked suddenly, her voice stronger. "The medical corps would have valued your skills, regardless of your political disillusionment." Kevin was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "There was a girl, a Zeri child caught in crossfire. I operated for 16 hours to save her." He swallowed hard. "When she recovered, they classified her as an enemy asset rather than a civilian. They took her for study because her injuries had been caused by an experimental human weapon." Suena turned in his arms to face him, their faces inches apart in the dim light. "What happened to her?" "I don't know," Kevin admitted. "They transferred her to a research facility. When I protested, they relieved me of duty. That's when I walked away from everything." Suena reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that worry and guilt had etched there. "You couldn't save everyone." "I know," he said. "But I should have saved her." They fell silent, the weight of shared trauma creating a different kind of intimacy between them. Eventually, they slept, still wrapped in each other's arms, no longer doctor and patient. Not quite lovers, but something undefined and precious nonetheless. They woke to the sound of distant engines, the distinctive whine of Merc hover vehicles. Kevin moved quickly to the station's old monitoring equipment. Though mostly defunct, the passive sensors still functioned on backup power. 3 units, he reported, studying the rudimentary display, moving in a search pattern about 2 kilometers north. "They're closing in," Suena said, joining him at the console. She had recovered significantly overnight, her movements once again fluid and purposeful. "We need to reach the drop point before they find us." They gathered their supplies and slipped out of the station as dawn broke. The weather had improved slightly, less snow, better visibility, but that advantage applied to their pursuers as well. They traveled swiftly, Suena setting a pace that would have been impossible the day before. The terrain became increasingly rugged as they approached the border region, natural rock formations providing cover from aerial surveillance. By midday, they reached a narrow ravine that marked the approach to the drop point. Suena led them through with confidence, navigating the treacherous path with practiced ease. "The resistance maintains this route," she explained. "The rock composition interferes with standard scanning technology." The ravine opened into a small valley, sheltered on 3 sides by steep cliffs. At its center stood a massive, ancient tree, gnarled and weathered by centuries of mountain storms. "The drop point," Suena confirmed. She approached the tree, examining its trunk carefully until she found what she was looking for. A small, almost imperceptible cavity near the roots. From her bodysuit, she extracted a tiny data crystal and placed it in the cavity. "My information on the merging program. Locations, procedures, key personnel." She pressed the crystal deeper until it disappeared completely. "The resistance will find it." "What now?" Kevin asked, scanning their surroundings. The valley felt exposed despite its natural protection. "Now we separate," Suena said, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying deeper emotion. The resistance will contact me through established channels. I need to continue alone. Kevin had known this moment would come, had prepared for it logically, but found himself unexpectedly resistant. The mercs are still searching for you. And they'll continue searching for both of us if we stay together, Suena countered. Our bioenergetic signature is stronger when we're in proximity. Apart, we'll be harder to track. She was right, and Kevin knew it. Still, he hesitated. Where will you go? There are safe houses along the southern frontier. Places where Zeri like me can disappear. She stepped closer to him. What about you? Will you return to your bunker? Kevin hadn't thought that far ahead. The cabin was compromised, and the bunker might be as well. He couldn't return to human territory without raising questions about his recent activities. He was, he realized, nearly as untethered as Suena. I don't know, he admitted. Suena nodded in understanding. Then perhaps it's better not to plan too far ahead. She reached into her pocket and extracted a small vial containing what Kevin recognized as a diluted version of the black dose. I'm destroying these. From now on, I live not just for missions, but to protect freedom. And to be with you, if you'll have me. Kevin smiled and embraced her. We'll fight together. They stood there, holding each other as snowflakes began to fall again, their future uncertain, but filled with new purpose. I should go first, Suena said eventually, reluctantly pulling away. Give me a head start. If we're separated for several days, the imprint signature will fade enough to confuse their trackers. Kevin agreed, though everything in him resisted the logic. They shared one final embrace, neither willing to call it a goodbye. How will I find you? Kevin asked. Suena pressed something small and metallic into his palm, a locator chip. I've disabled the official tracking function, but it still contains my unique signature. It will lead you to me when the time is right. With that, she turned and walked into the forest, her figure gradually disappearing among the trees. Kevin stood watching, long after she had vanished from sight, snow settling on his shoulders, his expression a mixture of concern and hope. 3 weeks passed. Kevin had found temporary shelter in a series of abandoned mining tunnels, not far from the drop point. He spent his days scouting the surrounding areas, gathering supplies, and monitoring merc patrol patterns through a rudimentary sensor network he'd established. On the 23rd day, the locator chip activated, emitting a faint signal that only specialized equipment could detect. Kevin tracked it to a location several kilometers south, deep in the border forest. He approached cautiously, aware that it could be a trap. But when he reached a small clearing nestled between towering pines, he found Suena waiting for him. Her bodysuit was torn in several places, with evidence of recent injuries not fully healed. Despite this, she stood tall, her posture conveying both strength and relief at seeing him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a diluted black dose vial, now empty and cracked. With a meaningful look, she crushed it completely in her hand, letting the fragments fall to the snow. I destroyed them all, she said by way of greeting. From now on, I live not just for missions, but for freedom, and to be with you. Kevin smiled and stepped forward to embrace her. We'll fight together, he promised. Their silhouettes merged against the backdrop of falling snow. Two figures from different worlds united by circumstance, choice, and something neither had expected to find in this cold, divided frontier, hope. As they walked away together, the vast wilderness stretching before them, their future remained uncertain. The mercs would continue hunting them. The resistance would face challenges. The divide between their peoples would not heal easily. But in finding each other, they had discovered something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. In the most unexpected place, through the most desperate circumstances, they had found a connection that transcended biology, duty, and the artificial boundaries that separated their worlds. They disappeared into the snowy forest, leaving no trace behind, except their intermingled footprints, which would soon be covered by fresh snow. A clean slate. A new beginning.